Hello. Well, first of all, I got new glasses. Second of all, you can't tell, but I'm filming this like halfway through July. I have finally finished a book. Wow. It's been a while. Okay, so I finished Neuromancer, which I listened to on audiobook, and I really liked it. It's like the cyberpunk novel, and it's mostly about a guy who they call a cowboy, and he has this ability to like jack in to the Matrix. They call it the Matrix all the time, and I kind of giggled every time. But I don't know, and I guess he uses it to hack stuff, I guess. I don't. It's all kind of flowery and vague, specifically what it is he's doing. Because to be fair, I don't think William Gibson knew anything about computers. But okay. The plot is that he is hired by this strange, mysterious man called Armitage to do something unspecific that involves hacking. And the reason he even takes the job is because basically, like, the story is that a couple of years previously he was this great, like, hacker or whatever. They never say hack in this book. They don't use that word. But that is still essentially what he's doing, I think. You know, so he would do this, and this was his job, and this is like how he would do this. But then he stole some money from one of the like jobs that he did, and got caught by the people who had hired him. And so they like damaged his nervous system in a subtle way that makes it impossible for him to jack into the Matrix. Yeah. So then he just spends like 2 years in Tokyo spending, like, he still had the money. They didn't even take the money away. But he spent all of it, like, trying to get this fixed, and nobody could fix it. And so he sort of just starts doing, like other black market kind of, like, selling drugs and selling, like, computer stuff. But anyway, so that's why he takes this job, because the guy's like, I will fix the issue that you have so that you can do this job for me. And then reveals later that if it doesn't all pull through perfectly, he will reverse, essentially, the thing. So, that sucks. But yeah, so it ends up, it's mostly about, like, this character, Case, and this other character, Molly, whose job is mostly kind of, like, as a kind of a heavy, I guess, and to sneak around, and also to sneak around and stuff. And so she's not doing any of the computer stuff. She's doing stuff like in the real world, I guess. But I don't know, a whole bunch of it is set up on this like space station, and there's these AI, and they figure out eventually that this AI has actually hired them, but they're also being hired to like break the security into the AI. So they're like, what? So it's a whole thing. There are 2 AIs. One of them is called Neuromancer, but that's not even the one that most of the book is about. Like, most of the book focuses on the other AI, Wintermute, which is a very cool name, but it's not who the book was named after for some reason. I don't know, I really liked it. Like, it had a very descriptive book. Very well written. Like, I always felt, like, very immersed, I guess, in the character, in where Case was, and, like, what he was experiencing in the moment, in, like, a sensory way, I guess. It was interesting. And it was especially interesting because I feel like a number of the things in that book have become cliches of kind of cyberspace and like the way that it's envisioned and stuff, but this was sort of a beginning of some of that, at least. And I thought the story was interesting overall. It had some really I don't know, science fiction elements that I really enjoyed. I like AIs. I like, kind of this, like, the space station and the way it was set up. And, yeah, overall I thought it was really good. I don't know if it has a sequel or anything. I obviously could find that out. But even if it doesn't, I want to read more by William Gibson for sure, because I really enjoyed how it was written, and I also really liked Case, the main character, because he's kind of a mess. Yeah, so it was totally worth it, and I recommend, you know, this classic of sci-fi that people already know they should read. But I recommend it too. Hello. I finished reading Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett. It's one of these very hideously ugly editions from the library, which, that's an exciting thing. Our library is open again. They're like limiting how many people can go inside, and you have to wear a mask and etc. But, yeah, and you can't hang around. They like moved all the tables, but you can get books, and that's honestly what really matters. So, Feet of Clay. This is a reread for me, because I kind of went in like, all right, let's just grab a couple of things. Let's keep her simple. But I've been dying to reread some Discworld, and so I took this one because I really like it. And I really liked it again the second time. This is one of the books about Sam Vimes. Yeah, so this is one of the Sam Vimes books. And Sam Vimes is my favorite character in all of Discworld. I adore him. And I just really like the stories of the city watchmen and all the nonsense that they put up with. So in this one, there are some mysterious murders. There's some nonsense going down with some golems in the city, kind of acting weird. And somebody has been poisoning Vetinari, the patrician. I love this book. Yeah, so this is the book with like a lot of golem stuff, like Feet of Clay, it's in the title. And I really enjoy it. Like, the golems make my heart hurt. And also, like, okay, also this introduces Sherry Littlebottom, who is the dwarf, a dwarf character in the Watch, but she is also a she. Dwarves have tendency to, they kind of go single gender. They all just go by he, they all just do kind of the same masculine things. I mean, it's all a bit silly. It's all about, this book was written in 1996 by a cisgender straight man. But, it's still fun. I mean, I like the thing with the dwarves because it's kind of the old joke of like, okay, well, why are all the dwarves, what's the deal with dwarves? Are there female dwarves? Tolkien, answer our questions. And I think kind of just the fantasy genre kind of coming up with this like dwarves like all kind of look the same thing. So, because they all have beards, I don't know. Listen, so it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I love Sherry and she's adorable, and I forgot that this is the book she's introduced in, so I got really excited about that. There's also a lot of very funny stuff with Cullen, with Nobby. I always love a good Nobby plot. Like, he's hilarious and he's so dumb, but like, he's smarter than Cullen, so that's always fun too. And there's a lot of really good puns in this, and a lot of moments that just kind of make, you know, make you feel pain for the golems, who are alive, actually. But yeah, so I really liked it. And yes, I absolutely am occasionally just rereading Discworld books because I don't want to face the fact that if I keep reading ones I haven't read before, I will eventually run out. But I'm actually nowhere near doing that. I haven't even read half of them. I've read, I think, maybe 16 or 17 of them. But the problem is that I'm not as interested in a lot of the ones I haven't read. So, but I'll get there eventually, you know? Eventually. But it's sad. Okay, that's good enough. I love this book. Feet of Clay, highly recommend. And Vimes is on his, you know, top game in this, and I wish Sybil actually got to do, like, anything. She was in one scene, but she was asleep, so I don't even think that counts. So I missed my girl Sybil, but, like, whatever. Angua was in it a lot, and I loved all the stuff with Angua and with Carrot, and this is an aside, but, like, if you've ever watched Due South, do you not agree with me that Fraser and Carrot are, like, really similar? Okay, that's not important, but I just thought I'd mention it. Yeah, moving on. This was great. Thank you. Goodbye. Ancillary Justice by Leckie. Finally read it. I've spent like all year looking forward to this book, and I finally, you know, got it from the library and read it, and it was wonderful. I super loved it. Yeah, it was everything I hoped it would be. So this is the first book of a trilogy, which I've of course going to read. But how do I even begin? It's sci-fi, obviously. It's like set in some far distant future, and the main character is the mysterious Breck, who we learn has a singular mission to, first of all, get a special gun, and second of all, shoot the Lord of the Raj. And okay, so that seems fairly simple, but it's like not at all. Because, okay, the thing that kind of like caught my attention when I heard about this book was the fact that the main character, Breck, is, all that's left of what was once a spaceship intelligence that had thousands of linked soldiers and what they called ancillaries, which are essentially dead bodies that are being controlled by the AI. I mean, they're not like rotting or anything, but like the people who they originally belonged to are dead. Let's put it that way. And the book kind of starts out where you get these alternating chapters where some of them are telling the story 19 years previously that is slowly leading up to like why the Justice of Torin and like was betrayed and why, like, as she thinks of it, and why Breck is all that's left and exactly what she is. And then the other chapters are about like what she's doing like now in the present 19 years later, which involves like she's on this like ice planet in the middle of nowhere, like trying to track down a special gun. But it's like there's so much. So the coolest world building thing, there's a couple of really cool world building things. One is all the gender stuff. So the idea is that Raj, the language of the Raj people or whatever, who are these like expansionist imperialist monsters practically, but they've been spending thousands of years like taking over space, and they're human. I mean, there are some alien species, but like they're not super important, at least in this book. I have a feeling they will be more later on, but like we don't really meet any of them. But anyway, the Raj language is like doesn't have gender, so they don't gender pronouns, they don't gender like anything that like addresses or like titles or anything. I guess they just kind of don't gender, and that means that the whole book, even though it's been obviously is in English, in theory Breck is telling the story in Raj, and so everyone is referred to as she, with the exception of when Breck is specifically talking to someone in a different language, and then always has to kind of like guess, because she's never quite sure, well, not never, but she's often not quite sure what the right pronouns would be, unless she knows somebody really well, in which case she's like, okay, I know this person is male, so I'll, you know, but like with strangers or with people she doesn't know super well, it's like a guessing game. So that's fun. And it kind of means that like for the majority of characters in this book, like you just don't have any idea whether they're men or women in the context of like their own cultures or what they would be in ours, I guess. Like obviously if they don't have gender in the Raj, then they're not men or women, they're just people. But still, like it makes imagining the characters kind of difficult, which I think causes you to kind of tend to imagine everybody as a woman because the pronoun default is she. But then, like, you're thinking, well, that's not really correct. So, it's weird. It makes you think. The second really cool thing is how all of the, like... Okay, my battery died, and it's been, like, hours. I don't remember what I was talking about. So I'll just try and conclude this, I think, by saying... Oh yes, wait, hang on, no, I was talking about the way, okay, the way the Ancillaries work and the way the Lord of the Raj works involves like all these mental connections between people, and like the Ancillaries, which is what Breck like was before Justice of Torn was destroyed, you know, they're controlled by the AI and mentally connected to it. Well, the Lord of the Raj does something kind of similar, where they have just a bunch of clones, basically, but all of them are mentally connected. Although, so like basically you can kill one and there's still a gazillion other ones. And the whole kind of plot comes from as Breck slowly realizes that the Lord of the Raj, Anander Minanayan, has actually, like, for a good 1,000 years been sort of literally of two minds. So some versions of her are fighting other versions of her that have other, like, plans for the Raj. So anyway, it's super interesting. I also, like, love Sivardin. She's great. Fantastic. My favorite. And Breck is like so intense and dedicated and hardcore, and I root so hard for her. So I'm like really excited to continue reading this series when I get around to it. But probably won't be in terribly long because I really loved this. All right, I think we're good now. All right, I finished Quackery, a brief history of the worst ways to cure everything. So I have been reading this for like 7 months, like since the beginning of the year. Actually, since I think the end of last year. And it's not long. I just would pick it up like one day a month and read a bit of it. It's something I got for Christmas. As it says in the back, medical oddities and morbid curiosities. It's like, there's a lot of pictures in it, and kind of colorful pages and stuff. I don't know, this isn't really displaying particularly well the point I'm trying to make, but whatever. And you know, it's about quackery, but it's not just about like snake oil salesmen and you know, legitimate like people we would call quacks. It's also about people who were considered legitimate doctors and things that were considered legitimate cures for things like bloodletting or cautery or enemas. And it's very weird, and it's divided in all these little like sections. So, you know, including things like, you know, literal poisons like arsenic, or you know, things that are actually drugs like opiates, lobotomy. That's fun. It's a fun one. I like cannibalism and corpse medicine. It's good. There's a section on sex. Animal-derived medicines, which was mostly about like people putting bits of goat testicle like in their testicles. Well, not in theirs, in like someone they were operating on, which, nope. Yeah, so it was really interesting and fun. And it's also like very easy to read. It's like, it's very much something that you don't have to know anything about anything to read this book. Yeah, so I guess I would recommend it if that sounds interesting to you. It's kind of just a bunch of fun history facts about the weird stuff we used to put in our bodies and the stuff we used to do to them to try to cure diseases, the majority of which didn't work at all. Although the end of every section talks about whether there's anything related to that subject that we do today. So that's kind of fun too. But yeah, I finally finished it. Alright, I finished another book. We're on a roll. Sin in the Second City by Karen Abbott. So, you know, as you can see, this is an audiobook that's actually on physical CDs. What? The story with this is that I requested it through the library back in March, and then, you know, everything shut down. And then a couple weeks ago, I get an email that's like, hey, you can pick this up now. And I'm like, okay, it's time, I guess. All right, so Sin in the Second City is a nonfiction book about Chicago, again, my favorite historical subject. And, oh, I should read you the subtitle. Madams, Ministers, Playboys, and the Battle for America's Soul. So this is about, mostly it's, okay, about a few things. Mostly it's about Chicago's Levee District and how it was kind of brought down, but through the filter of the Everleigh sisters and their brothel. It says it's the most famous brothel in American history. Sure, I mean, I've never heard of it, but I've never heard of any brothels, so what do I know? So yeah, so Chicago's Levee District was basically the red light district. Ow. Amazing. Was the red light district back in like the turn of the century, you know, 19th to 20th back then. And for a few decades at least, it was a pretty happening place. And Minna and Ada Everleigh started a brothel called the Everleigh Club. Actually, they don't even call them brothels in the book that much. They call them resorts. I guess it was a bit of a euphemism. But, and honestly, the Everleigh Club sounds like a really nice place. Like, it was 3 buildings connected to each other, and, like, they had, I mean, the sisters had this ethos of how they were going to run their resort. Like, they weren't gonna permit drugs or, you know, like, okay, like one of the things is that men who went to these kinds of clubs were kind of putting themselves in a certain degree of danger, because a lot of them would get their wallets stolen, or they would be, like, given a knockout drug and, you know, get their stuff stolen or whatever. So at the Everleigh Club, stuff like that was not permitted to happen. And also the girls, the women who worked there, were all, like, treated very well. They were paid a lot, and they, like, legitimately, like, they made more money in a week doing that job than they would, like, a regular factory job or whatever else, a stenographer or whatever women came to Chicago to do. They were healthy. They went to a real doctor. You know, and so just, like, it kind of sounds like the Everleigh sisters had a business model that, like, it doesn't sound like it has any problems to me. Like, I'm with it. I think they should have just been allowed to continue to operate. But of course, Puritans exist, right? So much of this book. Okay, so a lot of the point of this book is to talk about, like, these groups that rose up in reaction to kind of all of the vice occurring in cities, in order to get rid of it. And, like, a lot of it is about this white slavery thing. I cannot tell you if it was even a real thing. Like, I read this whole fucking book and I can't even tell you, because, like, they had this notion that, you know, women were being forced into this life of sex work, and that they were being, like, trafficked across state lines and all this stuff. And on the one hand, there was proof that this did sometimes happen, but it didn't happen to, like, every single woman who worked in the Levee District. And then also, it always gets really mixed up with, like, on the one hand, a lot of bad things were happening there, but on the other hand, the way that these crusaders talk about the people who work there and talk about the whole idea is very unpleasant at times. Like, they want to save people, but they also, like, I don't know, and it seems, and they keep talking about ruined women, which is just gross, and, like, they just keep getting, like, it almost seems like, you know, there's a point where they stop feeling sorry for you, and, like, you're ruined, you're done, you're unsavable. They're focusing on, like, preventing anybody else from getting in this situation. It's really unpleasant. So it's like, whose side can I even possibly be on? But it was interesting. It was interesting, and it made me think a lot. And it's an interesting, like, bit of Chicago history, and there's some like very powerful First Ward aldermen involved, and like of course they were getting like money from all of these saloons and clubs and whatever in order for them to continue operating. But obviously this was all kind of like, it's not official. It's just, oh, you know, you pay us the protection money and then we continue to, you know, work in government to prevent like anybody from raising the levy like they want to. Of course they did eventually raise the levy, but I guess at some point the aldermen didn't think it was profitable anymore for them versus, you know, all of the negative, you know, stuff coming from the Crusaders, etc. And I don't know, just there's a lot of big characters in this, a lot of interesting people. Personal favorite random quirk of a character was probably, well, I say a character, they were real people obviously, but probably what was his name, Big Jim Colosimo, I think. I think he was mafia or something, but he had this thing where when he came to talk to somebody, in this case in the book it would always be the Everleigh sisters, about business or whatever, he would bring spaghetti and cook it and feed them, which I just thought was funny. They didn't even like spaghetti, but you couldn't like tell them that, I guess. Okay, also if you've read the description of the book that's on the back, I think it, like, it mentions Al Capone. And the thing is that, like, it really shouldn't, because he's barely in this. He's mentioned like twice, but really Al Capone's kind of, the interesting things he did in his rise to power, etc., all took place after the Everleigh Club, like, was closed, and basically after the story in this book is pretty much over. I mean, he was definitely connected to some of the people, you know, involved, but later on, so he's not really relevant. So if like that was a thing that would have enticed you, I'm just saying that you're gonna be disappointed. But I did like it. It was interesting. It made me think a lot, and yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's the question of what place prostitution kind of has in, I don't know, in reality, in the business life. I don't know, it's interesting, because, you know, I figure that as long as everything's on the up and up, it ought to be legal, no questions asked, right? Like any other industry. You know, obviously, like, it can be particularly dangerous and unpleasant, but so can a lot of things that, like, we're totally fine with, like coal mining. But anyway. But yeah, that's Chicago, that's the Levee District, and that's all she wrote. I don't know. And I like the Everleigh sisters. They're interesting, and kind of the mystery of just like, who exactly are they and where are they from? And this one little kind of period of time of, I think about, I can't really remember, 12 years or so, where the club was in operation and was kind of this just amazing place. Of course, you had to be super rich to get in there, but still. You know, they had an idea and they went with it and they did it and they succeeded, and then, you know, eventually they had to close. Oh, and that was so annoying to me too, because it was like these Crusaders and whoever, everybody was like pointing out legitimate problems with all of these different places in the levee, but it was the Everleigh Club that was closed first, and I'm like, they never even really did any of these things. Now, I mean, ultimately they weren't arrested, nobody there was arrested, whereas there's plenty of examples of other people who ran other similar but shadier and cheaper places getting arrested later. But anyway, so I guess like that was good for them, but okay, enough. It was good. And yeah, add it to my, I've been thinking of maybe doing a video where I talk about books I've read about Chicago history, so, you know, add that to the pile. But that's enough for now. All right, last day of the month, last book, Rapture of the Deep by L.A. Meyer. Since I have library access again, I am getting back into the Jackie Faber Adventures series, and I have just read this one. And as usual, I am making a reading vlog for a couple of these books, so I'm not going to get into it very much here, but it was fine. I liked it, but it wasn't super memorable, and it's just not one that, like, it didn't stick with me before, and it's not really a favorite, but, like, you know, it's still good, because it's still Bloody Jack. So I'll kind of, like, obviously more detailed thoughts in the vlog.